Then the second thing that you described is this RAG process allows for retraining of the language model and tuning it. And it's really fascinating to me to stop and think about what's the impact of doing that training. Because if you're training a publicly available model, something in the public domain, but you're ending up training it with proprietary data, then your proprietary data becomes part of that public domain. And this is a really interesting consideration for our customers who almost all of them deal with very sensitive information. As they expose that into the public domain, suddenly they lose control of what they wanted. So RAG allows us to accelerate the goodness, but also, like everything else, the other side of it is it allows us to accelerate the badness too.
Well, you bring up a really good point, and I think it's a point that deserves clarification. So as you said, let's say I've got a large language model and I'm asking it questions. Now, if I'm using this model, my prompts, regardless of the user agreements out there, they all promise, don't worry, we're not going to use your prompts as training material. But let's just say they haven't the best. And the LLM at some point is going to be retrained. Well, it's going to be retrained on the training set that it had before. Plus, it could be trained on all of the other prompts that are coming in. And that's where you have that proprietary data leaking out into the wild. One of the things RAG attempts to do is it never touches the LLM. It doesn't retrain the LLM. It just collects more factoids in the staging area, as you mentioned. So as the LLM gets retrained, it may have received these massively huge prompts that went into it. How do we know that now these massively used prompts with lots of great, wonderful, pre-sifted, sorted, and categorized factoids added to it, how do we know that's not going to wind up into the next training cycle of the model? There are, however, some really smart folks. A lot of the folks that were at Meta left and formed another company. And one of the concepts was, what if we change the very fabric of large language models? And we changed the way that they handle context. And they're building a new thing called a conceptual language model to handle context. And that's being called RAG 2.0. So the paint hasn't even dried yet on the term RAG. And we're already talking about RAG 2.0. So you can imagine before the paint's dry on that, there's probably going to be someone who says, no, that's not the way to do it. And there'll be a RAG 3.0 or something like that. So this is rapidly changing. And if we boil it down, we still don't really know how the human brain works, but we've got some vague ideas that we've got this stuff called like long-term memory. And we've got this stuff called short-term memory. We have this same kind of analogous thing going on in AI right now, where LLMs are kind of like this long-term memory. And they're very difficult to change. And we have kind of the short-termy, kind of more temporal, contextual type things. But eventually there has to be a mechanism that moves some short-term memory into long-term memory. I move houses. I really do need to have in my long-term memory what my new address is. And RAG 2.0 is trying to figure out, okay, so how do we do this? How do we take this contextual type information and over time move the important stuff, whatever the heck that means, into long-term memory? I think that's a fascinating parallel.